Robert Hageman walks through the front door of Altoona City Hall for the first time as its city manager.
There were plenty of prayers and tears for the family and friends of 3 fallen volunteer firefighters in Houstontown. The jury also considered Roger's age when it gave him a reprieve of sorts, life in prison without parole.
Every day that the strike continues is another day that they are not being educated.
1990 was a year of big transition for Keystone Country. Entering a new decade meant new challenges and new opportunities. As the year draws to a close, we look back at 1990 with the Action News Year in Review.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Action News Year in Review. I'm David Venable. For the next half hour, we're going to take a look back at the stories that made news and touched our lives in 1990. The new year started off with a new form of government for the city of Altoona. The city changed from the mayor-council form to that administered by a city manager. On the 2nd of January, a new crew of officials took over at City Hall. Dan Milliron replaced Alan McCool as mayor of Altoona, and 3 new council members, Tim Little, Jim Covino, and Sandra Fry, were sworn in. Under the new governmental setup, the size of the Altoona Council was expanded from 5 to the current 7 members. The new form of city government meant a new manager for Altoona. Robert Hageman, formerly of Muskegon, Michigan, took over the reins of government at City Hall in mid-January. Under the new council manager form of administration, Hageman became responsible for the day-to-day operations of city government. All department heads now report directly to Hageman and in turn serves as City Council's primary representative in City Hall. In Centre County, the operator of a private daycare center went on trial for molesting young boys inside his home. Gerald Brion was convicted of numerous sexual offenses and would later be sentenced to 5 to 12 years in the state prison. His wife pleaded guilty to charges of endangering the welfare of children and was placed on 5 years probation. Probation was also the sentence for 2 former officials of the State College Manor nursing home who pleaded no contest to 11 counts each of recklessly endangering elderly residents. Former Administrator John Fabrizio and former Nursing Director Eleanor Kraft were given 4 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and a fine for failure to act on reports of patient abuse. A state probe into the care and treatment of residents led to the closure of the home in October 1989. In early February, the state of Pennsylvania mourned the loss of one of its veteran lawmakers. At the age of 56, Russell Letterman, a Democrat from the 76th Legislative District, died following a long illness. Friends and colleagues called the 10-term House member a 20th century frontiersman, a man who was tough, brave, and loyal to the end. Faulty wiring was the cause of a February fire that leveled the garage at D&M Chrysler Plymouth in Altoona. There were no injuries in the blaze, but damages totaled more than $800,000. And an early morning fire in Indiana County turned out to be one of the region's biggest tragedies of the year. 4 members of the Earl Marsh family died when flames ripped through their small frame house in the community of Arcadia. The tragedy was compounded when another family member, 19-year-old James Marsh, was arrested and charged with deliberately setting the blaze. Later in the year, both Marsh and his co-defendant, 21-year-old Wayne Wright, each entered guilty pleas to 4 felony counts of third-degree murder. Authorities say robbery was the motive in the grisly murder of a Blair County man in late February. The body of Brian Wineland of East Freedom was found that morning in Blue Knob State Park. He was shot in the head 6 times. The following day, state police arrested 35-year-old Donald Eugene Summers for the crime. At this time, Summers is still awaiting trial in the Blair County prison. In March, an alert state trooper aided by a drug-sniffing dog turned a routine traffic stop into one of the biggest drug busts in state history. The trooper pulled over a U-Haul truck on the turnpike near Bedford. The vehicle was stopped for speeding through a construction zone. During a thorough search of the truck, police found an estimated $68 million worth of cocaine hidden under a false bottom of the vehicle. The drivers were making a drug run from Philadelphia to Detroit at the time of the bust. And authorities in Huntingdon sponsored the biggest drug raid in county history in late March. Thanks to a tip from the Huntingdon County Drug Hotline, police arrested 2 area men and confiscated a tremendous amount of cash and drugs. Convicted killer Stephen Edmiston spent part of the year in Clearfield County, where he was tried for kidnapping 2-year-old Bobby Jo Matthew. That was the little girl he was earlier convicted of raping and murdering. Throughout the course of the year, Edmiston continued to file appeals of those convictions in the Cambria County courts. We'll start the year in review with sports with the Pittsburgh Steelers. After their worst start in franchise history, the Black and Gold rallied down the stretch to make a serious run at an AFC championship. Gary Anderson split the uprights, and the House of Pain in Pittsburgh beat the Houston Oilers in the first round of the playoffs. playoffs. The dream was dashed in Denver, but Merrill Hodge and the Steelers proved that they are a team to be reckoned with in the future. And the Penn State basketball team enjoyed its best season ever on the broad shoulders of Eddie Fogel. The Lions went 25-9 and finished third at the NIT in New York City. The Lady Blue Devils of Bellwood Annis had quite a ride in '89, going all the way to the state finals before losing. And still to come on the Year in Review, a Blair County man is sentenced to life in prison for a brutal murder. And a Fulton County community mourns the death of 3 area firefighters. All that and much more coming up. Stay with us. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Year in Review. I'm David Venable. The big story in April was a forest fire in Clinton County where more than 200 firefighters spent 2 days battling the blaze in Sproul State Forest in Renova. More than 10,000 acres burned. Altoona residents were shocked by a brutal murder 2 summers ago. An acquaintance of the victim, a city teenager, was charged with the crime. In May, 19-year-old James Rogers, known as Frankie, went on trial for the murder of Pasquale Lascoli. Reporter Charlotte Ames, who covered the trial from start to finish, has our report.
On the night of June 7, 1988, 62-year-old Pasquale Lascoli was stabbed more than 70 times during a robbery at his home. Police arrested James Rogers, who was 17 years old at the time of the murder. The prosecution used a relatively new technology in efforts to tie Rogers to the murder, DNA testing. Experts told the court the genetic testing revealed that Lascoli's blood was on shorts and other items of clothing belonging to Rogers. However, Rogers protested his innocence, testifying that he was asleep after taking drugs and alcohol the day of the murder. After more than 20 hours of deliberations, the jury found the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. District Attorney William Haberstroh called for Rogers to be sentenced to death, but jurors, noting Rogers' youth and his troubled family history, issued a sentence of life in prison. Rogers' attorney continues to appeal the conviction. Charlotte Ames, TV 10 Action News.
1990 spelled a great loss for Fulton County volunteer firefighters. 3 members of the Houstontown unit became victims not of fire, but of an invisible force. Mary Jo Powell has a story.
What started out as a gesture to help their neighbors ended in tragedy for 3 volunteer firefighters. James Chestnut, Richard Hershey, and Thomas Lane all perished while pumping water out of a Fulton County well. Carbon monoxide overwhelmed them before rescue workers even had a chance.
We never had anything like this happen in this community, and we're all new to it. And we call other companies in to try to help us, and it's just too late.
I mean, they were real close friends. They were good firefighters. I could always depend on them whenever I needed them. It's just a hard time right now.
The sudden loss of the firefighters has resulted in a review of volunteer training and technique, not just in Houstontown, but throughout western Pennsylvania. Mary Jo Powell, TV 10 Action News.
One of Altoona's brightest students gained national attention this year when she captured top honors at the annual Geography Bee in Washington, D.C. 12-year-old Susanna Batko-Yovino won the national competition, and in addition to a scholarship award, she also appeared on 2 nationally televised shows. Susanna hopes to pursue a career in the sciences. No issue in Clinton County attracted more attention this year than the controversial dike and levee project in Lock Haven. The $86 million flood protection plan was passed, but not without marches and other protests. The plan took years to complete and is expected to protect the city against the more serious floods that have devastated the area in the past. And finally, the month of May was also highlighted by the statewide primary elections. Several races were hotly contested, and among those was the governor's race. While incumbent Robert Casey had an easy victory over fellow Democrat Phil Berg, Republican challenger Barbara Hafer had a tougher time defeating GOP contender Peg Luksick. And locally, a handful of people were up for the 76th District State House seat. That seat was vacated earlier in the year by the late Russell Letterman and ultimately won by Democrat Mike Hanna. The motive was a romance gone bad. That's what the Cambria County jury was told during the mid-June murder trial of 26-year-old Donald Kelly. Kelly was charged with the shotgun slaying of 20-year-old Richard Dowie in Barnesboro. Dowie was in bed with Kelly's ex-girlfriend when he was shot to death. The jury found Kelly guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison. Martinsburg area residents continued their fight through the summer to prevent the Spring Cove School District from building an elementary school near the Blair County Airport. The final months of that effort were highlighted by protests, public meetings, and court dates. However, the taxpayers ultimately lost their uphill battle, and construction on the project is expected to be completed by the fall of 1991. 2 Huntingdon County men were gunned down in their home on June 19th. State police say 31-year-old Timothy Steele and 24-year-old Lewis Taylor were shot to death in their Warriors Mark Township residence. According to police, Charles Turiano went to the home, shot and killed the men, and then was apprehended nearby at his brother's residence. Turiano was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. An uncle of one of the victims suspects the shooting were the result of a love triangle involving Turiano, Taylor, and a woman. 2 Columbia County teenagers were found guilty of murder in connection with the 1989 kidnapping and stabbing death of a St. Mary's woman. 19-year-old Daniel Crispell was sentenced to death for his part in the kidnapping, robbery, and stabbing death of 48-year-old Ella Brown. Crispell's accomplice, 17-year-old Christopher Wetherill, is still awaiting sentencing. More than 6 months after former Cambria County President Judge Joseph O'Kicki was convicted of bribery and corruption, he was back in his own courtroom for sentencing. Presiding Judge Richard Griffo told O'Kicki he would spend between 2 and 5 years in prison. Citing the serious nature of the felony crimes of which O'Kicki was convicted, Griffo ordered the suspended jurist to pay more than $45,000 in fines. Griffo also told O'Kicki to return the state the $80,000 a year salary O'Kicki had been receiving since he was suspended from the bench now more than 2 years ago. O'Kicki remains free on bond pending a state Supreme Court appeal of his conviction. A new 911 emergency phone system for Cambria County was initiated this year. The system is expected to be in operation by the end of the new year. A $1 million county tax increase will fund the 911 program. In addition, each county phone customer will pay a $1.25 monthly fee. Richland Township and the city of Johnstown remain the only 2 county municipalities not committed to the new 911 system. In Altoona, the idea wasn't to save lives, but rather to save the very heart of the city. City Council cleared the way for millions of dollars of in-town development by approving an urban renewal project that had been on hold for nearly 6 months. The project includes a $20 million expansion of the Altoona Mirror and the renovation of the abandoned Townhouse Motel. Developers want to turn the former motel into a nursing home called Nittany Manor. And in mid-June, a 23-year-old Easton woman was crowned as the new Miss Pennsylvania. Marla Wynn captured the title at the Jaffa Mosque in Altoona. Wynn, a ventriloquist, performed a rendition of Together Wherever We Go with her feathered friend Oscar. She went on to become a top 10 finalist in the Miss America pageant in Atlantic City in September. Now let's take a look at sports during the months of April, May, and June. As the weather began to break, Keystone Country turned its attention to baseball, golf, and the out-of-doors. And one of the first rites of spring here is the Chevy Pro-Am at the Scotch Valley Country Club. Once again, the powers that be assembled a great field of professionals for the one-day event, and this one came down to the wire. Clark Dennis beating Rocco Mediate on the first hole of sudden death to capture the first-place purse. And after the lockout, the Pittsburgh Pirates managed to get out of the gate rather well, sitting atop the National League East for most of April, May, and June. Still ahead on the year in review, a longtime friend and leader of Penn State University decides to step down. And a selective teacher strike in Clearfield County cancels classes for nearly a month. Those stories and much more coming up. Keep it here. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Year in Review. I'm David Venable. July was a good month for motorists in Pennsylvania. The state adopted a new auto insurance reform law rolling back rates from 10 to 22%. That wasn't good news for insurance companies, though, who suffered from less revenues. Many companies tried to be excluded from the law, but the state held firm and most complied. After a year and a half of construction, the 219 Airport Interchange near Johnstown opened in July. The $2 million highway project tied together an industrial park, a major highway, and an airport that's experiencing growth in its private and corporate air traffic. Controversy surrounding the allocation of city funds was ever in Altoona's spotlight during 1990. Among his many challenges, Controller Stu Duncan haggled with city police over the control of federal drug seizure funds. Money recovered from 2 area drug dealers was earmarked for new police equipment. But Duncan insisted the money should be channeled through the city's general fund instead of being handled solely by Police Chief John Riley. After much bickering, a compromise was reached. August brought a changing of the guard at Penn State as the university's top man stepped down, ending a more than 7-year reign as president. Dr. Bryce Jordan's retirement closed out a term some refer to as legendary. Under his direction, the university climbed in academics, research, and fundraising, which netted Penn State more than $300 million. Jordan and wife Jonelle headed south to Texas, where he's now writing books and chairing several educational committees. As tensions rose in the Persian Gulf during the hot days of summer, effects of the crisis were felt here at home. Nationwide, consumers quickly saw gas prices jump an average of more than 29 cents a gallon. And locally, hundreds of goodbyes were said to loved ones sent off to do their part in Operation Desert Shield. And at this time, those soldiers remain in the region with no return date in sight. The beginning of September saw most area students going back to school, but a teacher strike in one Clearfield County school district sent everyone home again. As Action News reporter Michelle Saad tells us, those teachers used an unusual tactic to solve a typical wage dispute.
Just one day into the new school year, the West Branch Education Association decided to begin a selective strike. That meant they'd vote nightly on whether to teach or picket the following day. The union made the move because district officials refused to budge on their request for a wage freeze and because no new talks were being scheduled. Officials, however, said their hands were tied because state funding had fallen short of their expectations.
At this point, if we are not careful, the district will be committed to paying out money that will not be supplanted by the state.
For the following month, the selective strike continued and residents began taking sides. Many were upset because they didn't know from day to day whether school would be open or closed. But teachers stuck by their decision to use the selective strike process.
Selective strike process means for us, we will call the night before and inform them whether we will be there the next day or not.
Then, in late October, the West Branch School District was granted an injunction forcing teachers back to work. A Clearfield County judge ruled that the strike was jeopardizing the entire school year, but he ordered contract talks to be stepped up. An agreement was finally reached on November 19th, giving teachers an undisclosed pay hike over the next 3 years. The details are still being worked out on the pact. Reporting for the Year in Review, I'm Michelle Saad.
In Lock Haven, it was a crime that shocked a campus community. A murder-suicide involving two men who apparently were lovers. Police say 19-year-old Michael McGarvey strangled his former roommate, 20-year-old Michael Houseneck, in the victim's Lock Haven University dorm room in September. McGarvey hanged himself in his apartment only days later. Turning now to sports, baseball dominated the dog days of summer, and we'll start with the AAABA. Altoona's LS Fiore had quite a season for manager Ron Fiaccetta. Fiore winning the regional for the first time in recent memory. Mr. Donut took top honors at the Altoona Mansion Park Summer Basketball League. Chalk up another one for Mike Izzolino. Hundreds of cyclists took over Altoona the last weekend of August for the Tour de Tuna event. Bunky Davis was the hero, shattering the rest of the field on her way to taking the women's title. Even before the much-anticipated showdown with the Mets, the Pirates captured their first division crown in 11 years, clinching on the road against the Cards. Coming up next on the Year in Review, workers at two Mifflin County food stores walk off the job in 1990. And elections bring no real surprises in Pennsylvania. All this and more in a moment. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to the Year in Review. I'm David Venable. October was marked by labor unrest at two Mifflin County food stores. 130 workers at Giant Foods in Burnham and Lewistown walked off the job early in the month. The main sticking points are wages and benefits. Specifically, the companies demand that the employees pay into their own health plan. The strike continues and the next round of contract talks are slated for January. Traveling through Ebensburg was made a little easier in November thanks to the opening of a $30 million highway project. Construction on a 5.2-mile bypass was complete and the new highway extension through Cambria County was made available. The new Ebensburg bypass extends the limited access portion of 219 from State Route 422 to a point just south of Carrolltown. The possibility of hundreds of new jobs in Altoona was not realized this past November. Conrail chose Pittsburgh as the new site for a customer service center, saying Altoona had an inadequate phone service for the center. Bell of Pennsylvania said Altoona could provide the service, but Conrail disagreed. November elections in Pennsylvania revealed no real surprises. Governor Robert Casely easily defeated Republican challenger Barbara Hafer. In fact, he carried all but one of the state's 67 counties. And in the 30th state senatorial district, Bob Jubileer didn't have much trouble beating his opponent, former Altoona Mayor Alan McCullough. Jubileer ended up defeating McCullough by a 3-to-1 margin. Penelec announced plans in December to cut 300 positions by the spring. An early retirement incentive program is being offered to eligible non-union employees. The company's president says layoffs will result if the job reduction is not achieved through early retirements. A woman charged with killing her infant son made a shocking confession. 23-year-old Diane Spencer reportedly told police she not only murdered her son Aaron, she also killed 2 infant daughters born while she was living in Clearfield County. The deaths of both babies have been attributed to sudden infant death syndrome. Police believe Spencer suffers from a psychological disorder called Munchausen syndrome by proxy, in which a parent tries to smother a child in order to draw attention to the parent. The Clearfield County Coroner's Office is investigating. Spencer plans to plead not guilty in the case. And in mid-December, utility officials unveiled plans for a $500 million cogeneration station that would be located at Conrail's Juniata Shops in Altoona. The new plant could create hundreds of new jobs for the Blair County area. The plans are preliminary, but if all goes as scheduled, construction could begin in mid-1992. And now we turn to sports and the last part of the year as the Leaves began to turn color. All the attention shifted to the gridiron, but the local favorites didn't respond. The Penn State Nittany Lions stumbled out of the blocks, losing their first 2 games to the Longhorns of Texas and USC respectively. But that would be their only 2 losses of the regular season, their 9 straight wins including an upset of then number 1 ranked Notre Dame. The Steelers were the laughingstock of the NFL, their offense failing to score a touchdown in the first 4 games. But Chuck Noll righted the ship and got the black and gold back on course for the playoffs. And on the high school level, Purchase Line went through its schedule like Sherman through Atlanta, going undefeated and all the way to the state western final before the bubble burst. And that's our look back at 1990. It's been a tremendous year, one that has presented us with many challenges for the years to come. We've enjoyed being a part of your life in 1990 and look forward to serving you again in 1991. From all of us here at TV 10, I'm Dave Venable. Thanks so much for the company and Happy New Year.
Confiscated were approximately $15,000 in cocaine, $5,000 in marijuana. Those are street values. In addition, $5,000 in cash was confiscated.
They were overcome
with some kind of fumes, yeah, some kind of gas fume.
For every day that the strike continues is another day that they are not being educated.
I just want to savor this victory and thank the people for this expression of support.
Godspeed to you there. Best of luck to you.